do you still use public libraries? Many will remember these institutions being a big part of their childhood. But it seems over years, budgets have decreased, leading to many fighting for their very existence. Some libraries, in fact, have faced temporary as well as permanent closures. We're now joined by Library and Information Association of South Africa President Nazeem Hardy. Thank you so much, Nazeem, for your time this evening. This is certainly not good news. And let's talk about the impact of the temporary and permanent closures of some of these libraries for the communities.
Certainly. And thank you for having me. I think that any time a library is closed or access is not available to communities, obviously, ultimately it's the community who suffers. Today, I think libraries are not just a place where people go and take out books, which obviously is a great pleasure for many. But for many of our communities, and I think this is the sad thing about it, is that they use it for study purposes, for research purposes, for meeting people, simply kids doing their homework. Once we don't give access to people to do those things, everybody suffers in a sense. There are also libraries where it's sometimes the only place people can have access to a computer, can have access to Wi-Fi if it is available at the library. And again, these are things that are vital to people continuing their livelihoods, people continuing their schooling, their studying, and by not having this available to people, everybody suffers in a sense.
And it's also, you know, as you talk about Wi-Fi and computers, where some people in the community would also go to update their CVs and also see if they can get access to some job, opportunities where they're sending through their applications.
No, certainly. And I think in a country like ours, where the unemployment rate is as high as it is, especially among youth, a lot of youth will use the library for that very purpose. I think many people go to the library to do something as simple as typing up a CV, being able to mail it off to a job application. And again, cutting off these resources is detrimental to the communities that librarians serve. I think there's been great strides made by librarians over the last couple of years to kind of make the library a community space, being the center of a community. And through a thing like lack of funding, very often that is taken away. So staffing is not adequate, funding is not adequate, it never has been, and continues to be something that blights, I think, access to public libraries. And I think as long as we have that, we will continue to see lack of access to a public library being a problem.
And as you talk about, this particular problem, give us a sense of the numbers of how things are looking across the country. And as you answer that, give us some of the reasons that are given for some of these budgets that are decreasing.
I think the biggest problem, I think, in terms of funding for libraries, I think is still the issue of libraries being an unfunded mandate, and libraries are not the only institution that falls under that banner. So while we continue this fighting about, who is responsible for a public library, is it according to the constitution of the country, it is provincial competency. But if we look at where many libraries are situated, it is very much at the local government level. And so we understand to some degree, everybody is fighting for a slice of the pie. Very often, if you weigh up the issues and you say, how does life and death compare to access to a library? But I know of someone who said, so yes, these are life and death issues, but in some ways also, if we don't grant access to people in terms of information, slowly society dies as well, because education is the thing that we brandish and we say this is the way for people to get out of poverty. But if we look at the schools, if we look at the fact that there aren't textbooks available to children, there are no school libraries really available to children, public library becomes the only place where they can actually access information, access these things that will actually improve their education. And if we take these things away, then one's got to say, but aren't we actually dying as a society? If we also look at what is happening, not just I think in South Africa, but in the world, then one's got to say, but an informed nation is what we actually require for people to make decisions about their lives. Literacy continues to be a big problem. Libraries play a crucial role in terms of not just education, but also literacy. And today it's not just literacy in the form that we maybe know it, but also digital literacy. So much of misinformation goes around, and libraries play a crucial role in fighting all the levels of illiteracy that people face in society. So again, if we look at funding across the country, budgets keep shrinking. I think over and above the fact that budgets are shrinking, if we look at the cost of books, for example, if we look at the cost of electronic resources, they are extremely expensive. These are things, so even if a municipality, for example, gives you more money or a little bit more money than you had the year before, the things that you can buy with that money becomes less because they're becoming more expensive. And so whatever we get in terms of funding is never adequate to provide the kind of resources that I think people really need. And so we start seeing things like libraries closing on a Saturday. We see things like libraries not opening all the time. So we have municipalities at times where on a Saturday, for example, it's every second Saturday. Or in the case of some municipalities that we know of, libraries don't open on a Saturday at all. Factor in issues like crime, for example. So libraries don't open late nights anymore because staff safety is an issue. And so security cost becomes an issue. And so the cost of what we actually want to provide through a library becomes so many other things other than just the resources in the library.
Sure.
So certainly it's a huge problem, and I think what we require is the world to see the value of a library, because very often you cannot quantify what is the value of a library, and because you can't quantify it very often, it's easy to say, well, it brings in no money, so therefore it's maybe a place where you can cut funding. And it becomes a soft service that is easy to cut.
And definitely something that needs urgent attention, Nazeem, as you say. A whole lot gets done in communities when a library is opened, well taken care of, and functioning in the manner in which it should. But let me thank you for your time. And certainly this is a conversation that we'll continue to have. That was Library and Information Association of South Africa President Nazeem Hardy.